Reading Boruto recently, like a regular human being, and I got back to the end of part 1. And outside of the fact that chapters 52 to 80 of part 1 of Boruto are some of the best pieces of Naruto content in existence, the last 3 chapters in particular are straight heat. However, amongst all of that heat is some of the most important foreshadowing and exposition given to us in the entirety of Boruto's run. See, in those 3 chapters alone, we realize that Ada's charm ability is an extension of her subconscious usage of omnipotence. We're told that omnipotence is the programming code of the entire universe wielded by Otsutsuki gods. We find out that there's no way to break omnipotence, even killing Ada won't stop it. We see Mitsuki really, for the first ever continued and sustained period of time, uses perfect Snake Sage mode. We see the awakening of Sarada's MS. We see Sasuke becoming a rogue ninja again, and Boruto being exiled from the village, and so much more. However, amongst all of that, there is one sentence that's said by Momoshiki that sticks with me to this day, and that is, and I quote, "Have you ever contemplated how many times an Otsutsuki who became a god may have previously manipulated mankind's memories?" Now, these are the kind of things that keep me up at night, because that isn't just something that Momoshiki is saying to try and put doubt in Boruto's head that everything he knows is a lie. That is foreshadowing. Foreshadowing that some of the things that we know about the Naruto universe may not be accurate. See, with the introduction of omnipotence and the fact that there could be several entities out there that are capable of using it, we as Boruto fans are put in a somewhat precarious situation where we have to grapple with the idea that everything we know about the Naruto universe may not be true. And that's really cool. Not only from a reader perspective, but also from an author's perspective. See, because any and all discrepancies, plot holes, or inconsistencies in Naruto's timeline could be explained away through the usage of omnipotence. But it's not even just the weaknesses of the Naruto story that could be explained away with omnipotence. Events that we don't know that much about, even though we should, could also be explained through the usage of omnipotence. And considering the fact that Jigen was able to get his hands on Shibai's body, which heavily seems to imply that Shibai's body was on Earth, makes it seem as though what Momoshiki claimed about omnipotence being used on mankind's memories before seem all the more likely. And thus today, I want to talk about the events in Naruto's past that could have been altered with omnipotence. Events that range from Earth possibly being turned into a chakra fruit tens of thousands of years ago to the Uzumaki massacre. Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen, because today we're talking the Otsutsuki killed the Uzumaki. But before we get to theorizing about anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you guys are feeling particularly generous and want to hear me talk about anime and manga that aren't Naruto and Boruto, go ahead and follow my other channel, The Weeb Commander. Or if you want to see me try to bring real-life challenges to the anime world, go ahead and follow the brand new channel that I created with Stephen Heat, Chris Barnett, and Danny Mata called Anime IRL. Or if you just want to hear me talk about anime and manga, go ahead and follow my anime podcast, Otaku's Anonymous, where me and Danny Mata break down everything that happened in anime and manga this week. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Before we get into all that, today I want to talk to you about one of our favorite sponsors, Rosetta Stone. See, it's no secret that I run this channel in English, but learning languages has always been a big passion of mine, whether it was taking double AP Spanishes in high school or learning French in elementary school. As a child, I gained a massive fascination with learning other languages. The concept of being able to walk through the streets of foreign countries and speak with the people there for some reason always intrigued me, and Rosetta Stone has helped me keep that passion alive. See, Rosetta Stone is an all-in-one language learning platform that allows you to dive deep on whatever way you identify best into learning whatever language you're curious about. And with Rosetta Stone's immersive teaching style that integrates words and images into the learning process, I'm able to make natural connections in my learning that make picking up a new language a whole lot easier. On top of this, their voice recognition tool allows for me to perfect my accent by comparing it with that of local speakers.
一个女人和她的狗.
Which for tonal languages like Mandarin is huge. But that's not all. Rosetta Stone is a one-stop shop for language learning, as they offer phrase books, stories, live lessons, and audio companions to ensure that you're learning the language you want to learn the way you want to learn it. On top of this, lessons are as long as you need them to be, as lessons can be done in as little as 5 minutes. Lastly, Rosetta Stone wants you to be ready for the outside world, which is why they focus on teaching you words and phrases that are actually used in day-to-day conversation. So what are you waiting for? Check out the link in my bio to download Rosetta Stone today. You can get 60% off a lifetime subscription, taking the price from $399 to just $149. So what do you say? Sign up with Rosetta Stone today and start learning up to 25 languages. It's time we start turning those subtitles off. So, all-powerful narrative plot devices. A good idea or a bad idea? Well, it's kind of hard to say, because while there is absolutely authors out there who write themselves into a corner by introducing all-powerful characters or all-powerful abilities, finding a way to balance those characters and abilities and use them in a way that makes sense and is satisfying can lead to some of the greatest writing in the history of manga. Take, for example, what I believe to be one of the better-ended manga in modern manga history, Fire Force, a story about a boy who's able to fire fire out of his feet to propel himself to be super fast. Well, the story ends with him becoming a literal god and using these god-based powers to create the entirety of the Soul Eater universe, which I thought was one of the more satisfying and fun endings to a popular IP in a long time. Tie this into the fact that the power that Shinra Banchaman acquired by the end of his story didn't change who Shinra was as a person, and therefore this all-powerful, omnipotent being was still Shinra to the core. Now it is still technically yet to be seen as to whether or not introducing something like omnipotence was a mistake for Ikimoto. Omnipotence is already being used in a way that's vastly improved Boruto as a story, as the way that it's currently being maintained in Boruto is the fact that Ada is only able to use it subconsciously, as she is not only not an Otsutsuki, but not an Otsutsuki god. However, the presence of Otsutsuki gods has been confirmed, and the foreshadowing of their existence all but guarantees at some point in Boruto we're going to be seeing them, and probably not as one of the good guys. But has humanity squabbled with these gods before? Well, there's actually a fair amount of evidence to say that they have, and that it happened long before even Kaguya and Ishiki descended down to Earth 1,000 or so years ago. Because in one of the more talked about pages in Boruto's history, when we first saw the outside of the Kara hideout, we saw that there was 6 individual Otsutsuki insignias. 1 for Ishiki and Kaguya, 1 for Momoshiki and Kinshiki, and 2 that had for some reason or another been destroyed. Why had these marks been destroyed? Why would the Otsutsuki, who are notoriously proud and notoriously loyal outside of Kaguya, either destroy another set of Otsutsuki's insignias or destroy their own? And the answer is that they wouldn't, and that instead that these destroyed symbols could be simply blamed on omnipotence. See, omnipotence is an all-encompassing power, to the point where in Konoha, if you show somebody a photo of the Uzumaki family portrait, people will point at Boruto, even if Boruto's standing right next to them, and say, that's Kawaki. And therefore, when it comes to accomplishing a goal, omnipotence doesn't really leave anything out. And therefore, there's a fair amount of possibility that these Otsutsuki insignias were either destroyed by omnipotence or are purposely being obscured by omnipotence. But why? Well, take into consideration all of the evidence that we have that Shibai at some point or another was on Earth. We have the set of insignia at the Kara hideout. We have the fact that Jigen, who does have the ability to travel dimensionally and therefore may have found Shibai's body somewhere else, but Jigen did still bring Shibai's body to Earth so Amado could apply Shibai's DNA to all of the members of Kara and give most of them Shinjutsu. And how when Momoshiki was explaining about how omnipotence works, he said that Otsutsuki who become gods have the ability to use omnipotence to code the entirety of the universe, which seems to imply to us, the reader and Boruto, that Shibai is not the only Otsutsuki god, as Momoshiki's verbiage here seems to imply that there is multiple Otsutsuki gods. Then take into account Kaguya's story. See, how Kaguya ended up on Earth is one of the most hotly debated topics in the entirety of the Naruto fandom, because we got 2 very different iterations on that exact topic. What Kaguya told us in Naruto Shippuden is that she was chasing after seeds of divine trees that fell down from the cosmos onto planets, and therefore after chasing down a divine tree seed on Earth, she stumbled upon said divine tree but happened to fall in love with humanity and therefore didn't want to destroy all of them by consuming the chakra fruit that divine tree created. While the story that we got in Boruto is a lot different, as the story that we got in Boruto is that Kaguya and Ishiki descended down to Earth with the intention of turning Earth into a chakra fruit, but Kaguya, prior to allowing Ishiki to eat that chakra fruit, jumps Ishiki and tears him in half. She then herself would go on to consume that chakra fruit. However, regardless of how you look at the situation, there is one unilateral truth. Kaguya eats the chakra fruit, and usually after a divine tree has its chakra fruit consumed, the divine tree withers up and dies, like we see on Momoshiki's planet. Now, this is important, but why is this important? Well, because there's 2 ten-tails on Earth. There are the 9-tailed beasts and, well, Jura now. But what if what we know about divine trees isn't necessarily 100% accurate? At least in the circumstance of Kaguya, because after consuming the chakra fruit and giving birth to chakra and all of humanity, she eventually fuses with the very same divine tree that she took that chakra fruit from, which turns her into to the Ten Tails. The Ten Tails that would later become the Nine-Tailed Beasts. Now this seems to imply that the second Ten Tails, the juvenile Ten Tails, was actually brought by Kaguya and Ishiki to Earth, and that the older Ten Tails, the Ten Tails that later became the Nine-Tailed Beasts, was already on Earth in the form of the divine tree that Kaguya told us she was chasing after, which tells us there was already a divine tree made on Earth prior to Kaguya and Ishiki's arrival, which seems to tell us that Kaguya and Ishiki were not the first Otsutsuki pair to come to Earth. In fact, most likely what happened is that Shibai and his Otsutsuki pair came to Earth, casted under Infinite Tsukiyomi with the divine tree, and consumed the chakra fruit. And it was most likely this chakra fruit that led to the decimation of Earth, thousands of years prior to Kaguya and Ishiki coming to Earth. And this would explain a lot. It would explain why humanity was in such a nascent period of its evolution when Kaguya and Ishiki descended down. Because, well, yes, you can make the argument that this was technically prehistoric times for the Naruto universe. What if in actuality the real reason that humanity was so primitive when Kaguya and Ishiki came down to Earth is because they were still in a thousands of years long struggle to recover on what used to be a barren planet? That in actuality humanity used to be a far advanced culture that was bustling and full of life, until Shibai and his partner came down and wiped it out. But Nick, what does any of this have to do with omnipotence? Well, to that we come back to Shibai's body. See, because not only would Shibai's body being left behind on Earth after he consumed his final chakra fruit serve as a way for the Earth to bounce back from losing all its chakra, but also it would explain why nobody seems to know as to whether or not Shibai was ever on Earth. See, let's say hypothetically Shibai does consume a chakra fruit that is the straw that breaks the camel's back on Earth that ascends him to godhood. That means he would have to abandon his physical body and go live in a dimension somewhere. However, prior to doing that, wouldn't it behoove Shibai to hide his body? Otherwise, other Otsutsuki, or even possibly the fledgling humanity that he just wiped out through the medium of a chakra tree, could get a hold of his body and incredible power. And thus, wouldn't it make sense for Shibai, if he was truly going to abandon his body in either the Kara dimension or on Earth, to use omnipotence to erase the fact that he and his partner ever came to Earth in the first place? And here's the beauty of omnipotence. Well, yes, omnipotence, at least as we've seen it from Ada, doesn't work on Otsutsuki. What if it's being fired by an Otsutsuki god? Would it work on Otsutsuki then? We can't say, though we can hypothesize. However, the beauty of omnipotence is that even if you figure out that you've been affected by omnipotence, the way that omnipotence works is that slowly but surely that confidence will wane. And thus, what if the real reason that there's a discrepancy in Kaguya and Ishiki's tellings of their coming to Earth is because neither of them is entirely sure why they came to Earth in the first place? What if they, like Shikamaru in chapter 14 of Two Blue Vortex, realized they'd been affected by omnipotence but didn't know in what way? They just knew that they had to get to Earth. And by the time that they get to Earth, both of them are simply blinded by the fact that they know that the divine tree that they're trying to harvest the fruit from is one of the most powerful ones they'll ever come across. See, because this not only explains the discrepancy in their story, the fact that there was a divine tree there before Kaguya and Ishiki got there, and the destruction of the insignias at the Kara hideout. If we apply this level of logic and think about how omnipotence could have been used against humanity in the past, other events in Naruto's history start to make more sense. Think for a second on the Uzumaki massacre, an event that should have been undoubtedly one of the most important events in the entirety of Naruto history, and we know next to nothing about it. And not only do we know next to nothing about it, but the entirety of the idea behind the Uzumaki massacre is one of the fishiest things in Naruto lore. Let me quickly go over pretty much everything we know about the Uzumaki massacre. It happened somewhere between the end of the Second Great Shinobi World War and the beginning of the third one, and that the reason that it happened is because everybody was afraid of the power of the Uzumaki clan. And that is it. But really, when you think about the circumstances surrounding the Uzumaki massacre, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Let's think about the political landscape of the Naruto universe after the Second Great Shinobi World War. For those of you who haven't remembered the exact events of the Second Great Shinobi World War, yeah, I can't say I blame you. The Second Great Shinobi World War is the war that took place largely in the village hidden in the rain. And this is because this war, by and large, involved Konoha, the hidden stone, the hidden sand, and the hidden rain. And for those of you who don't have the map of Naruto memorized, I'm sure we're gonna put it on the screen right now with the power of editing, but the hidden rain exists directly between Konoha, the hidden stone, and the hidden sand. And so far as we know, the hidden lightning and the hidden mist were not involved in the Second Great Shinobi World War. And thus, in terms of Shinobi World Wars, it actually was probably the least grand and wide-sweeping out of all of them. However, with all of that said, even though the Hidden Lightning and the Hidden Mist may not have been involved in this war, this doesn't mean that the Hidden Mist and the Hidden Lightning were yucking it up on the side. Prior to the Fourth Great Shinobi World War, and Naruto, just kind of as a whole, none of the ninja villages were even remotely friendly with each other. Especially when you consider the fact that there was only 1 to 2 years between the Second and Third Great Shinobi World Wars, and that the Third Great Shinobi World War involved every single nation. And therefore, this time period right here is inarguably one of the most tumultuous time periods in the entirety of the Naruto universe. And yet, what we're told about the Uzumaki massacre is that it happens during this time window because multiple villages team up together to wipe out the Uzumaki. Now, while yes, it is a somewhat okay explanation that the Hidden Mist and the Hidden Lightning worked together during the Second Great Shinobi World War to wipe out the Uzumaki while Konoha was distracted. And considering that the Minato one-shot has played with Minato's age around the Second Great Shinobi World War, making him 5 to 6 years older than he should be, this is a plausible explanation to how the Uzumaki clan was wiped out. This makes sense when you consider the additional fact that the Land of Whirlpools existed on the coast across from the island structure that makes up the Land of Water. And directly north of them is the Land of Lightning, where the village hidden in the clouds is. And therefore, in terms of proximity, the two countries that were not involved in the Second Great Shinobi World War were the two countries closest to the Land of Whirlpools. However, if it was the Hidden Lightning and the Hidden Mist that worked together for some reason to destroy the Uzumaki, wouldn't that be something that was brought up again? See, because, well, yes, obviously the Uzumaki were an incredible strong point for Konoha and the Land of Fire, as Konoha basically had full usage of their Fuinjutsu and their ability to be Jinchuriki. Ironically, Konoha, prior to the existence of Naruto, never fully utilized the Uzumaki as a Jinchuriki in any capacity whatsoever. See, because, well, yes, Mito and Kushina are the Jinchuriki of Kurama, and Mito and Kushina were probably the only two people on Earth when they were alive that could have been the Jinchuriki of Kurama. The mass amount of chakra that is Kurama would have killed anybody who wasn't strong amongst the Uzumaki. However, we saw from the Minato one-shot that other villages had perfect Jinchuriki in the Second Great Shinobi World War and were utilizing them at full power. So much so that the entire plot of the Minato one-shot is Minato trying to create the Rasengan so that if Kushina is used in combat, she has a way to fight back. And thus, if you really think about it, the only village that wasn't using Jinchuriki in the Second and Third Great Shinobi World Wars was Konoha, and thus to assume that the other villages were looking at Konoha and the Uzumaki and going, oh, the Uzumaki are too good as Jinchuriki, we need to stomp them out, just objectively doesn't make any sense. On top of that, if other villages did truly revel in the power of the Uzumaki, wouldn't they try to steal a couple of the Uzumaki while ravaging the village? And yet they don't. We don't see a crop up of Uzumaki in any of the other villages that supposedly destroyed the Land of Whirlpools. There's no extra redheads running around the Hidden Cloud or the Hidden Mist. On top of that, considering how much trouble the Hidden Cloud has with Gyuki as a tailed beast, and mind you, Gyuki was being passed off from Blue Bee to Killer Bee exactly during this time period that the Uzumaki were supposedly wiped out by other villages, wouldn't it make sense that the Hidden Cloud, which has actively tried to steal power from Konoha, like in the Byakugan event, where ninjas from the Hidden Cloud tried to steal Hinata, which led to Neji's father's death, that village with the track record of trying to steal powers from Konoha would try to steal some Uzumaki to either learn their Fuinjutsu or figure out how they get their life forces so incredibly high. I mean, right? Doesn't it seem logical? If the Hidden Cloud was during the Third Great Shinobi World War willing to send in ninjas with a fake peace treaty so they could kidnap a child and rip out her eyes to analyze its powers, why, if they were involved in the stomping out of the Uzumaki in the Land of Whirlpools, wouldn't they take some Uzumaki? The same could be said for the Hidden Mist, as they have a track record of doing scientific experiments on their own citizens to make them into shark people, stealing citizens from Konoha to place tailed beasts in them so they can act as a Trojan horse in the middle of Konoha, and so much more. Why wouldn't they try to learn the Fuinjutsu of the Uzumaki? And thus, the more you think about the Uzumaki massacre, the less it makes sense. Because while yes, the Uzumaki were just one village in the Land of Whirlpools, they had married into Konoha. They were Konoha royalty. They have shrines across Konoha dedicated to their clan. Why would Konoha, outside of being bogged down in another great war, allow for the Uzumaki to be wiped out? I mean, without the Uzumaki, they wouldn't be able to control Kurama, the one-tailed beast they have left. So much of their village's power is tied played into the Uzumaki continuing to exist. But it's not even like the Uzumaki would necessarily need the help of Konoha. They had their own village for a reason. They were direct descendants of Asura, as related to Asura as the Senju. They were one of the strongest clans in existence, and thus I find it hard to believe that they would be summarily wiped out by the combined forces of the Land of Lightning and the Land of Water, especially to the degree that they were wiped out. I mean, they were eradicated. The only photo we have of the Land of Whirlpools, the entire city is leveled, and I just don't see other villages doing that level of destruction to an ally of Konoha without it ever being brought up again. So what if in actuality it wasn't the other villages? What if in actuality it was the Otsutsuki? Now I know what you're saying, Nick, that's ridiculous. Why would the Otsutsuki come down and just wipe out the Uzumaki? Well, that's actually a pretty fair question, and I have a pretty fair answer. And the answer is the Ten Paths. See, the Ten Paths are not a Shinjutsu that only Shibai or only Kashinkoji has ever awoken. The Ten Paths are a part of a long list of Shinjutsu that Otsutsuki awaken to as they get stronger. And the Ten Paths are a wildly broken, yet hard to control ability. See, the Ten Paths, as we currently understand them, as they're being used by Kashinkoji, allows for Kashinkoji to see all possible futures on Earth. At least all possible futures for himself. And as he's actively involved in the defense of Earth, that usually pans out to the future of the Earth. However, as we've already learned from Ada and her usage of omnipotence, these cyborgs who have gained access to the Shinjutsu that were once wielded by Shibai aren't able to use it at the level that Shibai or any Otsutsuki would be able to use it for that matter. And therefore, the level of power and precognition we're seeing from Kashinkoji probably pales in comparison to what an Otsutsuki, and especially an Otsutsuki god, could pull off. And thus, Otsutsuki gods like Shibai, when they get the Ten Paths, are probably able to see all possible futures for the entire universe. And one thing that they would probably see as they saw all the possible futures of the universe was a child being born out of the Uzumaki clan. A child of prophecy. A child of prophecy who would go on to defend his planet from an Otsutsuki in what probably is the first ever recorded instance of a planet actually successfully battling back against an Otsutsuki. This child of prophecy raises the entirety of humanity in a battle against Kaguya, and not only comes out successful, but comes out stronger because of it. And this planet is infested with Otsutsuki chakra because that same Otsutsuki that the child of prophecy defeated had children with that humanity. And thus, through the blood of every single living being on this planet flows the blood of the Otsutsuki, the power to transcend the Otsutsuki. And that very same child of prophecy who defeated his great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother in Kaguya would go on to have what is probably the real child of prophecy in Boruto, a child who one day's fangs may reach Otsutsuki gods. And thus, if this Uzumaki clan does not exist, this child of prophecy and his child of prophecy may never exist. And thus, what if the real reason the Uzumaki massacre is so cloaked in mystery is because the Otsutsukis tried to eradicate the Uzumaki clan to make sure that a timeline they saw using the Ten Paths never came to be. Because the Otsutsuki, just like Kashinkoji, have the ability to see any and all possible futures, especially the futures that involve Boruto getting Shibai's power somehow and using it to kill a god. And thus, what if in actuality, the real reason Naruto couldn't go live with his mother's family was because the Otsutsuki were trying to stop Naruto from existing in the first place. And after completing the task of wiping out the Uzumaki clan and leveling the Land of Whirlpools, the Otsutsuki responsible for eradicating the Uzumaki clan use omnipotence to make the world believe that they were responsible for the slaughtering of Naruto's maternal clan. And that's why the entirety of humanity can't necessarily put their finger on how the Uzumaki clan came to no longer be, but has a general grasp of why they're no longer around. This not only explains how an incredibly powerful clan like the Uzumakis were massacred completely, but also explains why we've never gotten a solid explanation of how it happened in the first place. And you cannot tell me right now when Naruto and Boruto are facing down Shibai in 60 chapters, and Shibai is telling Naruto about how the reason he wasn't raised by the Uzumaki is because he raised the Uzumaki to make sure that Naruto was never raised in the first place, wouldn't be one of the greatest plot twists of all time. But I'm curious to hear what you guys think. Do you believe that there's other events in the Naruto timeline that could be explained by interference from the Otsutsuki and the existence of omnipotence? Tell me in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Raise, like R-A-I-S-E, like to raise somebody into adulthood, and raise, as in R-A-Z-E, to destroy something completely, are pronounced the exact same way. I don't know how anybody learns English.